I invite Dr. Raina Raj, Head of Marketing Natural Remedies, a renowned professor in this field. We may hear from him. Dr. Raina, please.
A very good afternoon, everyone. Special thanks to our Honorable Chair, Professor Joseph Matthew, sir, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Shashindranath, sir, Professor M.K. Narayanan, sir, Professor Sudhir Babu, sir, Professor Girish Verma, sir. All are my teachers and all the other teachers who are also present and my friends. I must really appreciate the timing of this webinar and the choice of the webinar theme, the role of poultry sector in boosting the post-COVID-19 Indian economy, which is definitely a national issue, and it is of contemporary nature. It is indeed the need of the hour that we have such kind of a webinar where all the best brains of the industry come together and chalk out our action plans. I should thank my dear friend, Dr. Vimal Antony, to approach me and invite me for this webinar. So let me introduce myself. So as Professor Joseph Matthew sir had mentioned, so I am the head of marketing for Natural Remedies Private Limited, which is based in Bangalore. And as a organization, we are into the phytochemicals or the herbal feed additives, which is having operations in more than 30 countries. So a little bit of my personal background. So I completed my graduation in 2008 from College of Veterinary and Animal Sciences, Manupi. Post my graduation, I did my higher studies from Goa Institute of Management, where I did my PGDM in marketing. And after that, I have worked in the industry as in techno marketing function for around 11 years in various reputed Indian and foreign multinational organizations like Natural Remedies, Cargill, Cadila, Boehringer Ingelheim. So I was privileged to be part of various organizations. Thereby, I could gather some, first-hand information about the industry and also disseminate that information. So as a part of my job role, I oversee a team of veterinarians on the technical and marketing functions, and I have been privileged to travel to more than 11 countries and 4 continents in the past 2.5 years, and I could influence the opinions of people, close to more than 1,000 individuals who are in this sector, both in India and outside India. So as you would have observed, I am representing the industry here. And in the industry, the marketing plays a major role in communicating the deep science which are developed from the research and development facilities, the institutes, the research institutes, universities, etc. I would like to play a similar role here. I would be taking the session very nice and easy, and I will try to make it an interactive platform rather than a monologue. Now, why I'm saying this is that this particular opportunity, I find it not just as a fly-by program, but rather like how I always do in marketing function. I would like to get your buy-in also in some of the thoughts that I'm sharing. So I need your complete interaction. We will try to make this as interactive as possible. And I certainly would require your buy-in, your agreement, so that we can proceed with some of the common goals, which is strictly in line with the theme of this webinar, which is the role of our own poultry industry in boosting the post-COVID-19 Indian economy. Now, before we come into this topic, I understand from the organizing committee that we have quite a good number of our budding veterinarians in the industry. So I would spend a little bit of my time to explain a little bit where do we stand in the industry, the Indian poultry sector, where do we stand in the world. You might have already known that, thanks to the population, the demographics, the geography of India, we are at the top of the world. And I mean that in many or any of the yardsticks that we use in our industry, we are really at the top of the world. And you can see one infographic on the top, the top 10 feed producing nations. Now, feed production is considered as one of the best yardsticks because we have that available information, the data, which gets updated on a yearly basis. And we can compare countries with this data. So I go with the feed production data as one of the most important yardstick. And you can see out of the top 10 feed producing nations, we are there, the complete animal feed production. And you can see that we are very well in the top 5 in that top 10, just behind United States, China, Brazil, and Russia when it comes to the top total feed production. Now, let me give you some more perspective into this. If we see the number of feed mills, we are contributing to around 5% of the total feed mills in the world. When it comes to the feed production, for all species put together, we are contributing to around 3.5%. Now, these percentages, 5%, 3.5%, these are actually humongous when it comes to any global data because of the number of countries that are there in the world. And we are contributing to such huge numbers into the world. If you look into the broiler feed production, it is close to around 4% that is contributing. And if you see the layer and breeder combined feed production, we are contributing to close to 8%. Now, these figures would strictly align with the rankings, which our previous speaker, Dr. Veerasamy CGM, and our Honorable Minister also had said that the India rankings in the global feed production or in any other yardsticks, we are in the top 5 in many of them. We are 3rd in the layer production. In some of the statistics, you may find we are 4th. That is because some data may differ here and there, because when they consider European Union as one region, then we may be slipped into the next rank. But at the same time, Mexico is also running almost parallelly with our, so ups and downs are possible, but plus or minus 1, that is always there in the rankings. So we can safely say that we are 3rd in the layer production, means the egg production. Poultry feed production, we are 4th in the world. And the broiler production, we are in the 5th in the world. Now, this gives us a perspective of where we are standing, and it is good news for all of us that we are associated with an industry which is almost at the top of the world already. Now, since the topic is related to the Indian economy, how poultry industry can boost the Indian economy post COVID-19. So let's see, where do we stand in the Indian economy as a sector out of various other sectors in the country. If you have thought about how many breeders or layers or broilers are there in the country, like in numbers, then we are somewhere in the range of 300 crore broilers, 30 crore layers, 3 crore breeders. Again, the numbers can be a little bit up and down because of the current COVID situation, where the production capacities have come down. But always the proportion has been 1:10:100. 1 breeder, 10 layer, 100 broiler. That's how the industry looks at it. And that's how this is the data that we also use in our commercial activities to plan strategies. Now, if I speak about the revenues, so earlier what I spoke was the numbers of the birds. If I speak about the revenue, we are contributing 1.3 trillion to the Indian economy. 1.3 trillion Indian rupees in the Indian economy, and that is quite substantial. And we are all having, the employment crisis or, the discussions, debates going on. And as an industry, we are employing 4 million people directly or indirectly. And the number of birds that I mentioned earlier, these birds are distributed in around 5 lakh broiler farms throughout the country, around 25,000 layer farms, and around 700 hatcheries. Now, as you can see, this is a very substantial sector, and one straight answer to this theme is, the role of poultry sector in boosting the post-COVID-19 Indian economy My answer is we don't have any choice not to contribute to it. As such a big sector in the industry in the country, we are bound to support the Indian economy. And as a collective wisdom that we have who have gathered here, we should plan our actions for the national interest in giving this back to the nation. So in that direction, I would like to start my topic. And the topic is broadly divided into three basic subtopics. So the topic name that I have selected is a call for a paradigm shift in various aspects. So a paradigm shift is a fundamental change that we always say. Now, which are all those paradigm shifts? The first paradigm shift that I am appealing for is a shift in the consumer mindset. So what I mean here is the efforts towards increasing the role of animal protein in building our immunity post COVID-19. That is of paramount importance now. I'll explain that in the coming slides. So the first is consumer mindset paradigm shift. The second one is a shift in the poultry production mindsets. The possibility of producing more animal protein with lesser resources. That is also increasing in its importance in the situation. And the third is a paradigm shift in the feed industry, where turning towards our traditional wisdom, which we already possess in India, for countering the global market forces. Now, this is strictly in line with the government's call for self-reliant India or Atmanirbhar Bharat. So, covering these topics, I would like to connect each and every, because everything is connected with each other. I will take up points one by one. Now, the first paradigm shift that I had mentioned is the consumer mindset. Now, this, if I elaborate, it is all about changing our mindset to produce more immunity or generate more immunity in our body. And as veterinarians or as people in the industry, we know that this is very much possible by better protein consumption. Of course, there are other possibilities also by which you can improve your immunity, but nutrition plays a major role. A rich nutrition for every population, which is at least having good protein content, is very much required. Now, in this front, again, why this is even more contemporary is that how this COVID-19 has taught us. When this situation arose, we all are, even now also, we are looking for some immunization programs, some vaccinations, or some medications which can help in this particular, threat. But as we know, those are all maybe some near or a distant future. We really don't know by when that are going to come. So what is left with us? It is nothing but our immunity, our innate immunity, which needs to be strengthened. And as a sector, poultry sector, we have a major role to play there. So my objective is to bring that awareness, as I have been giving this awareness to many people around in the industry. But let me ask you one simple question. How much protein are we consuming? You can interact also in the comments. Let me reframe this question. How much do you think is the actual protein requirement in our body? So in that perspective, if I see the trends, generally, there are lots of surveys, reports that comes up in the mainstream media about this particular lifestyle concept of protein consumption. It is a little bit alarming that there is very low awareness. You can see in one of the infographic here, all India, the awareness of protein requirement in the human body is, that awareness is quite less. It is as less as 25%. Now, there is a concept in marketing that, you cannot improve anything unless you measure it or monitor it. So unless we know completely what should be the protein consumption requirement, then how are we going to ensure that the population gets that protein? So as a result, definitely the low protein consumption has happened. And the figures are a little bit staggering. All India, if you see, based on various surveys, 91% of the vegetarians and 85% of the non-vegetarians in India are protein deficient, if we strictly look with the protein requirement. Now you may think that this is for the rural mass or it is for the underprivileged, but no, that is not the case here. Even if we look at the urban rich, it is 73% of the urban rich population are also protein deficient. Now here we are talking about people like you and me who are actually undergoing this. Probably we are aware or we are unaware, but this is the reality as of now. Now, in this context, let me give you some highlights of it. Since I had asked this question, let me clarify it. The daily protein requirement, as per the ICMR, they have the dietary guidelines for Indians. And as per that, on an average, for a man and a woman, it is 1 gram per kg body weight. So if you safely assume average body weight is considered as 60 kg, but many of us sitting here are probably over or underweight of that. So we can understand our own. Now it is a time for self-reflection. So please view in that angle. How much is your body weight and how much you should consume? So if I take myself as an example, I would require not less than 80 grams per day. If it is a woman or any other person who is having a different life activity going on, maybe like pregnancy, lactation, then the levels are even higher. There is more requirement of protein. When we talk about the infants, definitely their protein requirement is higher. Children, teenagers, their requirement is even higher. So this understanding is very crucial for us so that we can have a reflection on how much we are actually consuming on a daily basis. Now, in order to make it easier to understand, we should take all this statistics towards our dining table. Now just assume we all just had our lunch. How much protein did we actually take for the lunch, or how much are we going to take for the dinner, or how much we took for our breakfast? Are they tallying with the requirement? So to make it very, very simple, in very colloquial way, if I say the normal staple diet like rice, roti, mixed veg, dal, these are the figures of protein that is there. So a normal staple diet, say if a person consumes this much for lunch or dinner, he is consuming 24 grams. That is the protein that he is consuming in a meal. Now like that, he will be having probably 2 or 3 meals more. So with that, is it adding up to that requirement? So when I had checked this myself with more than 100 people inside and outside the country, what I have realized is people like us, we ourselves are deficient, at least by 10, 15 or 20 grams per day protein. Now that is a reality that we have to understand and we have to progress towards. And one of the solution is supplementing this daily protein intake with high protein diet. And fortunately, the animal protein has a lot to offer. So when I say animal protein, of course, there can be differences in opinion. Vegetarian, non-vegetarian debates are always there. I don't want to get into that. There is good enough number of vegetarian, which we consider like milk or milk products are already there for the vegetarians as well. For the non-vegetarians, of course, egg and chicken. Even there are debates going on whether egg is a vegetarian or non-vegetarian. Even I don't want to go into that topic also. But there is something for everyone, which is having higher protein, right? Now, if we understand this first of all ourselves, and if we try to propagate this information to the public, we are actually doing a great service to the economy and the industry. I'll tell you how. Now, this particular point I was talking about only the quantity. Now we all know it's not only the quantity that matters, it's also the quality that we need to keep in our mind. So when it comes to the human nutrition, the quality standard, the yardstick, which is considered one of the best, is PDCAAS, which stands for Protein Digestibility Corrected Amino Acid Score. So it basically means that what is the quality of protein based on the amino acid requirements of humans and their ability to digest it. So this is one of the most reliable score for protein. And if you see the scores of these staple diets that we have, let me give you an understanding about the scale. So the score is from 0 to 1. 0 means there is probably no absorption of the amino acids. 1 means there is best absorption of the amino acids. Again, the dishes that are topping the chart are of animal protein nature. Cow's milk, egg, chicken meat, fish, which are having a higher score, which means that if you consume this particular source of animal protein, chances are that more and more of that amino acids which are there in the protein are going to be digested, assimilated, and absorbed into the body, and it will become our mass or the body weight or the muscles. There are other options as well, like soybean, vegetables, kidney beans, lentils. Lentils are like dal. Now they also have scores which are little bit lesser than the animal protein source. So the choice is ours, how we have to take care of both the quality and quantity of protein. Now, this is a good news that the industry, the sector that we are catering to, the products of this industry are topping in every charts when it comes to the human nutrition. So my appeal is, with this paradigm shift, what I'm appealing to the audience is, we all should make our efforts to convince people or propagate this concept or convince them, whoever is around us, to consume more and more of animal protein. With this contemporary issue of COVID-19 and the immunity related challenges, thereby we are giving a big service to the industry, because as the people consume more, definitely our industry will take a better shape. And again, we are contributing better to the economy, because a healthy population is always contributing to the economy in many ways. Their productivity goes up, their low work time comes down, people remain generally healthy, as well as the industry also will grow. The direct beneficiary is the industry only, because ultimately we only have to produce more. Now that point takes me to the next paradigm shift. Now this paradigm shift is about the poultry production. So producing more animal protein with less resources is of more importance now. As people consume more and more, then the onus is on us, the industry, the sector, to produce more and more poultry or poultry products. So in this front, the Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR, they have already laid out their recommendations, like 180 eggs per year, or if it is chicken meat, if it is around 10.5 kg per year. Now it's another matter that currently the levels are quite less. I don't want to go into that aspect, but I want to present in a different dimension here. Now, with this approach of ours, people like you and me sitting here, if we start appealing to the mass and people consume more and more, right now we are talking about around 138 crore population. Out of that, as per certain estimates, 71% is non-vegetarians, 29% are vegetarians. So in marketing, we consider this total consuming population, the available market. If we consider that 71% of 138 crore is around 98 crore, and if they start consuming as per the ICMR recommendation, it will become 176 billion eggs. That is the requirement. And poultry meat requirement will become 10.3 million tons per year. And where are we standing? Our current total production, as of the latest figures, is 103 billion eggs per year. As on 2019, we have crossed 100 billion. So there is a deficit of still around 73 billion. Now that's good news for us. There is more and more demand. There is a possibility that if we strive our efforts together, there is possibility of creating more and more demand. And this is just still the ICMR recommendations. If we start to match up with the developed nations, then it is a different story. Then the requirements will be even higher. Same way, if we see about the poultry meat production, we have to actually more than double our production. Now, these are all good news for us, that if the consumers start consuming more, then we have a better market in place. Our role in the GDP or in our Indian economy is ever rising then. But at the same time, we have to consider one more aspect here. When we start speaking about producing more, there is always questions of, is it possible? How much resources are available, be it land or water or feed material or human resources? So there comes the point of having more production by using lesser resources. So we have been hearing about the slogan of reducing the FCR of 1:1. Right now, we are talking about FCRs like 1.5 or 1.6, which are commercially very much possible nowadays. Now, here there is a call of making it 1, close to 1. Now, again, this has been a topic of so much of suspicion. People always take it with a pinch of salt. I have personally interacted with many people when I had pitched in this point. I have received a lot of questions like, how is it even possible? Is it practicable? Does it mean 100% nutrient utilization? Means what we are talking is, if you feed 1 kg of poultry feed, we are expecting 1 kg of live body weight. Now, naturally, these questions may come in anyone's mind. Some people may even ask, does it mean that birds won't shed any more droppings? Because whatever you're consuming is getting into the body. Now, if we have some of these questions in our mind, let me clarify it with one small statement. Let's bring in one concept of the dry matter into this equation and everything will change. Now, what we have told earlier is feeding 1 kg poultry feed to generate 1 kg body weight. There, what we are talking is essentially, if we consider the dry matter, we know that the moisture percent in the poultry feed is around 11 to 12% normally. If we take as an average moisture percent of 12%, that means 880 grams of dry matter is present in 1 kg poultry feed. But if you look at the poultry meat, we all know that 2/3 of our body, be it any animal's body, it is around 66% is water. So the dry matter calculation there, if we assume like 65% is the moisture of the meat, then we are saying the dry matter is around 350 grams out of 1 kg poultry meat. Now let's revise the statement. Now, isn't it possible by feeding 1 kg poultry feed, which is essentially 880 grams of dry matter, can't it yield 350 grams of dry matter of meat? Because the rest is mostly moisture or water. And anyway, we are practicing ad libitum watering in poultry. So the point of taking this discussion here is, we have to first of all understand that these slogans are very much possible and there is scope of further improving the FCR if we direct our efforts in certain ways by which it can be made possible. Now, let me ask you some questions to convince you even further. The FCR, the reduced FCR is already happening in some of the other animal world. Can I ask you a very wild question? Which is that animal that has the least FCR? The animal which we are producing having the least FCR. If you wish, you can put in your chat also. So it turns out that it is the fishes, the aquaculture, like the fishes that we grow like rainbow trout or Atlantic salmon or the normal salmon. You can see an infographic here. Fishes are already having a very less FCR, close to 1. Salmon having 1.1, trout having 1.1 to 1.2 FCRs are already there. Now, why this is possible for the fishes? There are some scientific reasons why it is happening like that. Because the aquatic species, they spend less energy, or the energy leakage is quite less for various of their activities. Like they spend less energy to move. They spend less energy to stay upright like the terrestrial animals. They don't have to regulate their body temperatures, very important, because they are ectothermic, cold-blooded. So they don't have to spend energy, burn some calories, or to create that temperature. So these are some of the reasons why fishes are able to do it. Now, you may think that this is a very, very different example, how it is even related to poultry. But I can assure you there are some learnings in this. As I mentioned, the thermoregulation. Let's come to this poultry itself. If you have observed the first week FCR or the week-wise FCR of broilers, I'm talking strictly about broilers here. If you observe the week-wise FCRs of broiler, how much do you think is the first week FCR? It is, as per some of the commercial calculations, it may go even lesser than 1, but that is not an accurate way of doing it, because generally the body weight gain has to be considered. The day-old chick body weight has to be subtracted. However, generally, even in the scientific papers also, you can see the first week body weight is close to around 1.1 or 1.15. So how come the birds in the first week of the life cycle are able to get such a lower FCR? And over a period of time, they are able to, the FCRs keep on increasing a little bit. And by the time of slaughter, it comes to around 1.5 or 1.6. So the idea here is that as the days progress or as the lifespan increases, the FCR increases. So in this context, let me put you one thing in the perspective. Like previously, say 20 years back, how much was the time required for producing 2 kg of body weight for a broiler? Imagine 1990s or before. It used to take more than 60 days. Now, because of the genetic selection, better breeds, it has come down to 38, 42. In the books, we are mentioning 42, but in the reality, many people are able to get it at 38 days. And it is predicted that by 2025, the number of days required to get that desired body weight would be as low as 32 days. So as the life cycle progresses, the FCR keeps on going up. And one more thing is that in the first week, I'll just come back to that topic once again. The first week, why the birds are having lesser FCR, one of the reasons is that in the first week of the life cycle of the birds, they don't have the capability of thermoregulation. And that is precisely why we keep them in brooding. So they are not spending energy to create that warmth inside the body. So can we have some learnings here? So let me put those principles into some actions. Now, of course, genetic companies, the breeds, the new breeds through the genetic selection, they are one of the major ways of bringing this high efficiency of feed. The genetic companies have long back predicted that every year you can see a drop of 2 to 3 points of FCR. So that means in a scale of 10 years, we can see around 20 to 30 points. Means currently if it is at 1.5, maybe in another 10 years time, we can see birds having 1.3 FCR or 1.2 FCR. And all the researchers' directions are going on in that front. And it is a certain future. But the question is it only the genetic companies who are able to do it? Nutrition, animal health, management, they all have their own parts to play in this. So better bioavailable nutrition for more nutrient retention. If we can clearly understand what is that digestible amino acid requirement, exact requirement to maximize the nutrient retention, that also will contribute to an increased feed efficiency. Better management practices, just like one example that I had mentioned earlier, reduced energy leakages through thermoregulation. If we are maintaining the climatic environment outside the bird so that the bird doesn't require to burn a lot of calories, then that is also a possibility towards achieving better FCR. Now, why it is so important is that imagine at some year down the line, if we manage to bring the FCR to 1.2, that means currently if it is 1.5 and if we are able to bring it down to 1.2, it necessarily means that 20% reduction in the feed to produce the same meat is possible. Or in other words, that saved extra 20% can be used to produce more meat. So that is also strictly in line with the concept of producing more with less. And that is gaining more and more importance, especially in this juncture. So this is my second appeal to you to propagate this particular notion of reducing the feed. So for any such kind of movement, we need some slogan. So we can safely accept this reduction of FCR of 1. And in whichever fraternity, whichever fields we are working, if we can direct our efforts towards this, maybe it can be a new thesis. Maybe it can be one of the new technical program for an organization. But if the direction is towards this, then we are actually doing more and more service to the sector, thereby building more to the economy. Now with this, let me quickly come to the third topic, a paradigm shift towards the feed industry. Now, in this area, you all might have seen, at least people who are commercially oriented, they would have definitely observed a big prices that we had faced around 3.5, 4 years back, that was nothing but the fluctuations in the price of the certain raw materials which are not necessarily produced in India. Now, when it comes to the feed ingredients, majority of them we are self-reliable. I mean, we can get our own maize, we can get our own soya. But when it comes to certain additives which are not produced in India, like vitamins, we are solely dependent on certain countries. Now, if we have to align with the government's new direction of Atmanirbhar Bharat or self-reliant, then we have to tackle this issue as well. So the vitamins price is you can see in the charts, it fluctuates like anything because of various global reasons. It can be higher pollution in China, leading to closure of some of the factories. This is the truth that has actually happened 4 years back. It can be because of a fire of a factory which produces majority of the vitamins. And that is not a story, it is the truth. So we are dependent on these individual events in the world and maybe rising tensions between countries, trade restrictions. These are all going to affect our each and every farmers. So what is the way forward for this? How can we be self-reliant? Again, the answer is turning inwards, turning towards the traditional wisdom. The wisdom that I'm speaking is about the plants that we have been using. So in the Indian medicine system, we have heard about Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, modern medicine, Hamchi. Majority of them are dependent on the medicinal plants which were traditionally been used by the tribal communities or through oral communication knowledge that has been shared down the generations. Now that used to be our medicine system, but now we have the technology to make it more modernized. So this herbal era that we are talking about this can be made into a phytochemical or phytogenic era. Again, the core principles are still the same. We are getting all those raw material from the plant world, the medicinal plants, and the synthetics that we have been using in the feed. Many of them can be either replaced or it can be made even better by using. You can get even better performances by using the phytochemicals or the phytogenics. So it is a matter of investing into the research to achieve certain pillars: genuinity, safety, efficacy, consistency. These are some of the pillars that the leading phytochemical companies are working to achieve this goal of reducing the dependency of our raw materials from the outside world. Now, if I put these things into perspective, now this is nothing new. This phytochemical industry or phytogenic industry is a sizable industry in the world. Now, if I just give you some, some infographics, the feed additives, the additives that we are putting in our feed is generally estimated to be around 33 billion US dollars in 2018, and it is estimated to reach 50 billion US dollars by 2025. Now, this is a CAGR, compound annual growth rate of 6.1% that is expected to grow. But the phytogenics market, it is a small dot as of now. It was around 0.64 billion, but it is estimated to double by 2025. So the CAGR is having, or phytogenics is having the highest among any other feed additives or the complete feed additives put together. There are, of course, other feed additives also like enzymes, probiotics that are also growing at a higher CAGR than the industry. But phytogenics play a major role, and all the leading multinationals, they are having their plans to expand into this portion, which is traditionally Indian, knowledge. If you travel outside world, if you speak about phytogenics or the herbs, people will normally speak about either Chinese herbals or Indian herbals. And we have been using this for years. And you can see here on the, the major companies in this phytogenics arena: Cargill, Delacon, Biomin, Blue Star, Natural Remedies India, which I represent. So these companies are already there. So it is a sizable market, and that technology that I'm speaking about is already existing. Just a little bit more idea. If we see the feed additives, in particular phytogenics versus the other individual feed additives like antibiotics. When we see these pie diagrams, it makes even more clearer that over a period of time, which market is going to grow faster and which of those segments are going to shrink. So it is very certain that the antibiotics market is going to shrink because of the increasing concerns of antimicrobial resistance or various other factors. And there are some upcoming segments which will eat up that pie, like phytogenics or like enzymes, like probiotics. We can see that the percentage increase in that share is as high as 19%. That means 19% it is going to outgrow the other feed additives in the market. So my appeal is that if we can turn towards our own expertise, which is the greener alternatives, that can solve majority of our issues, especially with related to the fluctuating prices of certain commodities which we are unable to produce in India. So just to give a future, so if any of the enthusiasts are interested, these are certain areas where we are working for the future development of this industry as well, like embracing the new age biological techniques, like zootech, which goes beyond zootechnological parameters, like the omics tools, which I think the previous speaker had already mentioned about it. The omics science, genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, these all are means by which we can get assured, as well as we can convince others that these greener alternatives are no lesser, but in fact much better than the synthetic ones which we are unable to produce in India. With that, I would like to conclude my topic, which was about the 3 paradigm shifts. So the first one being the paradigm shift towards the consumer mindset for better immunity. Second was the paradigm shift towards poultry production to produce more by consuming or giving lesser resources. And third, in the feed industry, to turn towards the traditional wisdom to counter the global forces. Thank you so much. Now I'm ready to take up any questions.
Dr. Rana? Dr. Raina?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear?
Yes, sir.
So, congratulations. I think your presentation seems to be a good eye opener. And you have taken the audience to a good high plane. The topics or areas which we have never thought, isn't it? Although sarcastically told, a bird without droppings, isn't it? It is, that means achieving an FCR equal to that of aqua, that is fish, 1:1. Is actually it is an achievable target from your presentation, isn't it?
Yes.
Number 2, the huge gap between the demand and supply of poultry, then identifying the consumer mindset with respect to body resistance, immunity with good nutrition, and especially more towards animal protein, and also the use of traditional wisdom and also self-reliance in the sector is also an eye-opener for us. I think all these paradigm shift points you have raised are very relevant, and we have to think upon it.
Yes.
And if you have to develop strategies. Okay, now it is open for a discussion. Any questions from the audience from different parts of the world we are looking? Any questions or clarifications needed?
One question is that how to convince people virus is not spreading through meat?
Okay.
One question there in the chat box.
Yes.
Because recently we know that corona and also this poultry, the rate is coming down and all these issues. So please clarify, sir.
Yes. So that is a $1 billion question, and that is one of the earlier struggles. Even before the onset of COVID-19 in India, we had started encountering these issues as an industry. And we have almost successfully countered that also. So I can brief about how we did it as an industry. So these are first thing is that we need to understand these are baseless rumors. There is absolutely no base on these aspects, because very simply we are not consuming chicken or egg just like raw. We cook it, and we all know that at a particular temperature of cooking it will not be stable. Now that is a very basic way of explaining. But second way, there is absolutely no possibility of spreading this virus or the particular virus that is in question through meat, which has been already been declared through certifications and through notifications by the government of India. So dispelling these rumors is very critical, and marketing PR works has to play a major role in encouraging people more and more in, or the extension team in the universities has to play a major role in dispelling these rumors and to bring the scientific facts into the picture. So with the so again here, these are the times when the organization strength, the industry strength is under question. Are we collectively, are we organized to make a stand and convince the government to release such kind of notifications which will reach the mass, so that such kind of rumors can be dispelled? So good organizing capability within ourselves in the form of associations can help in this front to bring the scientific picture into the people's mind.
Okay, sir, one more question. Strategies to reduce FCR less than 1.5.
Yes. Oh, okay. You're asking about the different strategies of doing it.
Yes, sir. To reduce the FCR. In commercial duck farming also one person has asked. Also in broiler another person has asked, sir.
Okay. So as I had mentioned in my presentation, majority of this reduction in the FCR has to come by through better genetic selection. So as you would have seen the new breeds that are coming into the market, they are all focused towards this particular goal. So definitely genetics has to play a major role. But at the same time, nutrition as well as animal health also has to play a major role here. So if I speak about the nutrition and health aspect, reduction in the possibility of microbial load in the feed or in water, like the basic sanitation of the feed and water, has also got its own role there. Because if there is high amount of microbials in these as feed or water, the bird will be spending more and more energy fighting off this. So that energy we need not spend for disease prevention. It has to be spent back for getting the mass. Better coccidiosis control, for example. Better gut integrity, gut health management. So any solution which can increase the health of the bird or increase the productivity of the bird will be helpful in this reduction in the FCR. So starting with the genetics, nutrition, health, all three has to play their own significant roles.
Another question, whether herbal feed are better than antibiotics?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that question. Can you say it again?
Whether herbal feed additions are better than antibiotics?
Antibiotics. Okay, right. So so here let me just make it a little bit broader. This antibiotics. Now the antibiotic that we are speaking can be introduced into the animals in two ways. One is as a medication. If there is any infection, definitely you have to go for antibiotics. No, absolutely no doubt about it. You have to treat that condition just like how we take antibiotics. But the other part, which is, you might have heard about the antibiotic growth promoters, the AGPs, which we call in the industry. Antibiotic growth promoters are nothing but, it is kind of an insurance that if we already know that some disease is going to happen because of certain low quality feed ingredient, then we tend to put an AGP expecting that I can reduce the quality, or even if some challenges happens, this antibiotic will take care. Now that is a not healthy concept of poultry farming. So the question, are herbals better than antibiotics? So I have just made bifurcation. Antibiotics have to be there in the industry, but antibiotic growth promoters, they are actually reducing in the trend. One of the main reasons because it is unjudicious use or extra use of antibiotics, which leads to antimicrobial resistance. So in those aspects, definitely phytogenics, in addition to other additives also like probiotics, maybe acidifiers, they all can counter these issues of disease occurrence along with a strategy of improved management practices in the farm. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Another question. Please mention some phytobiotics to improve immunity.
Right.
Some phytobiotics to improve immunity and heat stress.
Okay, heat stress and immunity. That's a great question. That is very, very close to my way of working also, the place that I work. There are traditionally known medicines or plants, like you might have heard about ashwagandha. You would have heard about Ocimum sanctum, tulsi, basically. So there are various such kind of plants which are being traditionally used in our practices. Now, in this phytochemical era, what I was saying was that if we focus on those phytochemicals like withanolides, triterpenoids, some polyphenols, basically, these all have that capability of increasing the immunity. Now, when I talk about immunity, it is very, very scientific in nature. We can actually prove that immunity by basically measuring the immune cells. Like earlier, one of the speaker had mentioned about HL ratio, heterophil lymphocyte ratio. If heterophil lymphocyte ratio, if it is, increased, that means, say, for example, lymphocytes are increased. That is certainly a parameter of innate immunity. So there are certain studies in the public platform. You can just Google it also. Withanolides or polyphenols helping increasing the lymphocytes proliferation. Same goes with natural killer cells. Same goes with macrophages. So there are phytochemicals which are clearly responsible for increasing the innate immunity. And the second aspect, I believe, it is the anti-stress part. Now, one thing we need to understand is the physiology of stress here. It is same with chickens. It is same with humans. Whenever there is stress, there are some cascading mechanisms inside our body, like hypothalamus will communicate to the pituitary gland, and pituitary gland will communicate to the adrenals to produce more fight or flight hormones. Now, this is the basic physiology of stress, and continued exposure of these corticosteroids or cortisols are not very good for the productivity. So there are again some phytochemicals which can reduce the cause itself. Even if the temperature outside is very high, leading to heat stress, the bird will not respond that much because the ACTH hormones or the corticosteroids are produced less in the body, thereby lesser response to that stress, and the birds will remain calm and cool. So there are such kind of possibilities. If anyone wants to know further about these specific solutions, they can approach me. I can help them with these solutions. Since it is a public platform, I didn't want to wish to communicate about any particular product as such. So you can contact me personally. I can give you further more information.
Okay, thank you, sir. One more question. Sir, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, poultry production economics in relation with shifting to phytogenics. Poultry production economics in relation with shifting to phytogenics.
Right. Fine. So if it is economics, then there are certain aspects to be kept in mind. Like, say, for example, all these phytogenics have their own varied roles. Some can be plainly growth promoters. Some can be a replacer of a costly nutrient. Or some can be like, reducing the disease symptoms, like, say, diarrhea, or as we had earlier talked about, stress. So the most connecting point, I will just explain about a nutrient replacement by a phytochemical. Now, we all have heard about choline chloride. Choline chloride is mandatorily needs to be put in the feed. Now, there are similar phytochemicals available in the industry, which is having the same price as of choline chloride in the market, but the dosage is 50% or even lesser. That means you can actually save up to 40 to 50 rupees per ton of feed directly. And it also gives some more space for some more nutrients to be added. Now that is a straight way of doing it. So these are very much possible. When it comes to the production parameters, there are well-known phytogenics which improves the body weight, improves the FCR, reduces the other disease symptoms, so that the veterinary treatment cost also can be reduced. So it is actually a Pandora box, if you ask me. Now there is another webinar can be conducted with that topic on it. It is such a vast topic. Again, I would repeat, if you want to know further about these, you can certainly contact me. I can help you with that.
Another question, what all the things can a broiler farm can take for reducing thermoregulation? I mean, maybe he's thinking about heat stressor or thermoregulation.
Right. So again, it's a good question. This is some of the field level questions that we generally encounter when we visit the farms. So it depends upon what is the spending capacity of this particular person. Now I'll give both the versions. If the person is a very progressive person, like he wants to make it more scientific way of rearing, then definitely there are options for environmentally controlled sheds. It is not equivalent to an air conditioner. It is just an environmentally controlled sheds where the evaporative cooling pads are in place with fans and with vents, so that there will be a constant speed of wind inside the barn, inside the chicken shed, and around 2.4 meter per second. If that wind speed is achieved, then we will get that cooling effect. Just like like I am sitting under a fan right now. If this fan's speed or this wind velocity is more than 2.4 meter per second, then I will get that cooling effect. Now that's precisely what the EC sheds also do. Now, of course, it has some expenditure. You have to invest a lot into the EC sheds. There are various companies in the market who can get it ready-made. But if it is a person who doesn't want to spend that much, then there are some local measures, like controlling the water temperature. Say, like, don't store the water in the direct sunlight. Grow some trees nearby, thatch the roofs, whitewash the roof or the asbestos sheet. There are such kind of easy techniques by which you can, at least minimize that. There are farmers who switch on the fans. Of course, again, it has some, recurring cost attached with it. Or else you can go for some anti-stress medications, which I had just mentioned. There are medications available in herbal segment. There are in the synthetics also. Like it is a general practice during summer stress, people go for electrolytes. So when none of these works, or maybe as an additional protection, you can go for some additives in the feed or water also, which can take care of reduction in the productivity due to the stress.
Yes, sir. So another question, an interesting question. More people are becoming vegetarians these days. How to deal with the consumer mindset? Okay.
Now, that is again, it's a very good question. And these are the real challenges. I mean, I have to admit, these are the real challenges in our industry. We have to, ask them basically the same one question, like, do you consider egg as a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian? Again, it is about scientific communication back to them. What they consider as a vegetarian is, or a non-vegetarian, is that it has some life, or we destroyed a life to create that food source. But for probably the mass public doesn't know that the layer farms doesn't even have a single male bird. Then where is the question of fertilization? Where is the question of life in those eggs? So they are called as table eggs. Now, they are very welcome to consume the table eggs, but they don't have that kind of a taboo when they consume milk. That is also from the same, type of production. It is also coming from an animal. Probably it is a food for a younger animal. Still, we don't consider that as a non-vegetarian. It is vegetarian only. However, this is one way of countering that. Other way is, to showcase that, consumption of at least the safe meat, like what we call the fish or the chicken, they are much more safer than consumption of, say, other, red meat. So that kind of a differentiation also can be brought about by scientifically communicating how much cholesterol is there, or even cholesterol, is it a major issue at all? If it is, then how much cholesterol may be added into this? Plus, you would have heard about, the NECC jingles, the cricket stars, the celebrities coming and talking openly to have egg every day. So these kind of joint efforts from the associations like NECC, or the major associations like Vets in Poultry, they all are already doing, and they will keep on doing such kind of activities. Whatever I can do, I am also doing from a commercial organization to make sure that these kind of, I would say, misunderstandings can be avoided.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think we'll wind up with one more question. How to assess efficacy of herbal alternatives? How to assess the efficacy of herbal alternatives?
Okay.
Also,
So-
one more question. During starter phase, whether we need to give this phytobiotic. During starter phase of the chick, whether we need to give phytobiotic.
Right. Many thanks for that question. So how to assess this phytochemicals? So let me put it in one way. There are phenotypic changes, genotypic changes we can measure. It is just like any other additive. Say, we all know about, we have been testing enzymes or probiotics in our own researches and all. So it is nothing different. It is the same way we can measure each and every parameter, be it body weight, be it HCR, be it feed intake, individual organs weight, we can measure the meat yield. All these are equally measurable like any other additive. But one thing that I want to add is, these phenotypic effects definitely will be visible. Sometimes it may not be visible for any particular medication also, because of so many variations in the farm. Say there was increased heat stress, that desired effect of that product might not have been visible. But then that is why the advancements in the into the area of genomics, the omics technologies which I had mentioned in the last slide, they play a major role. Whether or not there is a phenotypic change, there should be a genotypic change. And that is the upcoming trend. More and more nutrigenomics, metagenomics, metabolomics, proteomics studies are happening to ascertain whether more and more genes are expressed down-regulated or up-regulation. Some genes are not good to be up-regulated, some are not good to be down-regulated. So all these heat maps can be measured individually also and in a collective also. So that what is the action of that particular gene towards a certain activity, that also can be further measured by the protein that is being generated further after the expression of the gene. So the researches are never ending and the possibilities are sky high to further establish these aspects, and we are right in that track. There are no major side effects of herbals, provided it is coming from a well-reputed company. Again, one point I wanted to mention, anything that looks green is not safe. Anything that looks green is not safe. There can be toxic components in that. So you always have to see which is the organization that manufactures it, whether they have the right quality control measures to ensure undesirable substances, like, pesticides can be there. There can be mycotoxins, there can be heavy metals. Such undesirable substances needs to be taken out. And some of the phytochemicals should not be there beyond a certain limit. Like, we generally say in the evolutionary biology, there are some, the phytochemicals which are generally developed inside the plants as a defense mechanism. Those phytochemicals are there mainly meant to avoid any predators. Means if a predator consumes it, they may develop some symptoms like diarrhea or something like that. So we have to be aware about some phytochemicals which shouldn't be there or should be available in a certain limit. So the companies which are very progressive in this, their products, they can ensure that the phytochemicals or the undesirable substances are properly standardized, and you can safely use in any stage of the life cycle of the bird, be it starter, be it pre-starter, be it grower or finisher, anywhere.
Thank you, sir. the organizing committee is very much thankful to you, sir, for the excellent presentation and also for giving insight into the topic, sir.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
Dr. Raina.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Raina,
Yes, sir. I can hear you, sir.
you are hearing. Okay. Once more, I congratulate you for the very beautiful presentations and also the new ideas and challenges we have, which you have placed before the participants. So we will work together and hope that this discussion will be very much useful for changing our mindset.
Yes.
Our mindset rather than the consumer's mindset to tackle these issues more effectively. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you so much, sir.